Folks, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show, high atop a volcanic plug here in Salem, Oregon, and joined by an absolutely iconic musician, an inventor, a builder, and a melodic improviser, John Doan. Welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Yes, thank you for being here.
I have to ask you, going back to, late 60s, early 70s, how inspired were you by the acoustic playing of cats like John McLaughlin, especially because they were playing guitars that had a lot more than 6 strings?
Yeah, well, I actually went and saw him. And,
Can you talk about that experience?
And yeah, it was, he was, in West LA somewhere, and went with some friends, and I think it was with the Mahavishnu Orchestra, and just amazing. It was like he was unconscious in a usual sense.
Almost a yogic state.
Yeah, it was a kind of a yogi thing, and that was kind of attractive. I think that it was such a contrast to pop music, and it was jazz, but it was very free. And I don't know. I obviously was impressed enough that I went out to see him, and I don't know. There were lots of other players during that time too, and I love that kind of free thinking of kind of finding something, discovering something new. There's so much that's been discovered, but there's it's only a fraction of what is out there, and so he definitely is somebody who to give a listen to.
Did you had your own, or you had a psychedelic rock band that you were in? Can you talk about that? Because basically the first 2 decades of your career is somewhat shrouded in this fog, in the mystery, and I really want you to get into the idea of taking that. What was the first? The harp guitar didn't come out of that in 69 or 71. So, what was your first apparatus that had more than 6 strings on the guitar?
Well, I was in a rock band, and we did play some teen clubs in West LA, and
were they folk clubs, like where Tim Buckley was playing? Like, were they folk?
They were. Well, they were called, I don't even remember the names of them, but there were teen clubs with sawdust on the floor, no alcohol, because I was, a teen. And I had a 2-neck guitar, so I already was exhibiting some traits of somehow not quite getting in step with everybody else.
I love it. Yeah, I love it. What does that mean, a tube guitar?
Well, 2-neck guitar.
A two-neck.
So it had like a 12-string on one and a 6-string on the other, and so I was really into a lot of the music we played was original. I wrote a lot of the original music, and I just thought everybody heard tunes, and I would just come to band practice and say, hey, let's do this, let's do that, and so I love melody. I love melody and I love structure, working at something, improvising, almost like. I've heard of like Haydn apparently would spend the morning improvising and then jotting down some of the things that came to him, go to lunch, and in the afternoon he'd take those as new phase, new thing. Let's now kind of write a symphony out of this or whatever. And
was he notating it, or was it all in his head?
Well, it was first all kind of comes. Yeah. And this is something that a lot of people don't even realize about the classics, is that there is, it came out of somewhere, it came out of a moment. And then, I had been in a rock band, and I loved that. And then when I went to school at Cal State Northridge in LA, I was introduced to classical music, because they have kind of this bias that music isn't music unless it's, kind of basically European or classical stuff. And it was actually a revelation of, there was all this stuff that happened before I even was born.
You were not aware of that.
I was
before.
not aware of it, much of it at all. I grew up listening to my parents' music that was out of the 40s and early 50s.
Like swing band music?
I listened to swing band. I listened to my parents loved Fats Waller and Fats Domino.
They were R&B cats. They were into the
listened to Nat King Cole and that sort of music. I didn't know that wasn't my music. Because nowadays music's very can be focused for certain age groups, but so I would just hear that, and then my mother would play the piano, and she didn't talk a whole lot, but then it was this vibrant soul that there's such joy when she would play, and I just sort of was so impressed with that and understood that, and then even to coax me to get to bed at night, she would play for me, and I would be on the other side of the wall where the piano was, and so I always went to bed hearing music, and so it always was with me. Everything I did, I always sang to myself, and I thought everybody else did that, and so. So I don't even listen to music. Probably never have.
Right.
Except when I sit down and listen to it. I listen to John McLaughlin. I listen to the Beatles.
Gabor Szabo at all?
Gabor Szabo. Wow, a lot of people don't know who.
I mean, you're dealing with a serious cat. Yeah.
I went out and heard him. I've almost forgotten that.
Uh-huh. That gypsy. I mean, it was a gypsy feel, but he was not playing a double neck.
Gypsy and the bossa nova and the acoustic, kind of thing. I went out and listened to Joe Pass.
Yeah.
And it was with friends. We were sitting in this club. We came like 2 hours early, and we got like front table.
I love it.
And I've got my foot, not strategically placed anywhere, just under the table. But Joe Pass is sitting right there, and he's tapping time on my foot, and I'm going, to the guys. No. And so it was kind of eclectic being in LA.
Yeah.
All the different musics that came through in Hollywood and whatever, watching TV, it's just all the places I knew. It was it gave me a sense that the center of the world was there. And moving away and up to Oregon, I see that the world a little differently, but it does give you that impression that there's everything's there, and all the music, what you were saying.
I was just, people are clamoring. Could you play another tune on the harp guitar?
Sure.
Because people are just having a ball. I mean, this is it's such an honor to be with John Doan today. So yeah, please play free.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, so I've done kind of Celtic-inspired things. I've tried to find something that's timeless, that's kind of true forever.
What about raga music or like Indian music?
Well, I think there is some kind of meditative element to it, to some of the music. Again, I'll take form and I'll maybe play in different modes. I mean, like there's an old piece that you would know it as Green Sleeves. It's about 1,000 years old. Let me just put a capo on here. But it's well known.
Capo's coming on.
Yeah, so
it
creates a new relationship with the guitar.
Absolutely.
And the rest, and so, but I put it in Lydian mode, or this is how I heard it.
The Lydian scales.
And it just seemed timeless. It's sort of like when you get Plato talking about the Republic. He's got a whole chapter on music, that music should be used in certain ways. Like this type of mode shouldn't be played, before battle or something.
Shouldn't be played.
No,
should be. Okay, not. It's more peaceful.
It's too reflective, and that kind of thing. So this is my take on this timeless tune.
did you Buzzy Featon, Paul Butterfield blues band, decorated electric guitar player, serious player. He told me that one thing that gets overlooked in today's musical paradigm, especially with younger cats, is that they're a little bit more fixated on learning their chops before they actually like the sound that's coming out of their apparatus.
Well,
and I want you to talk about how you learned to like the sound that was coming out of whatever you were playing, as opposed to Monster Facility.
Yeah, so this is you're really kind of touching on something that I think is a theme that I've noticed, that today we have we're very much interested in being entertained, and we want to go and part of the entertainment, at least for guitarists, is virtuosity, and I had fallen in love with music from 200 years ago of this guy named Fernando Sor, and and I've been playing his music and kind of reading. I have a guitar that he may have commissioned back in 1819, and it kind of put me one step separation, and he lived in a monastery, and as a kid, and his teachers said that there was music and then there was anti-music. And I thought, what is he talking about? And he reached to his instrument to play something where his teacher had asked him to sing something. And the teacher said, no, when you do that, that's anti-music. And it should come out of your soul, come out of your imagination, your heart. And so that really got me to thinking that music in the English language, we have an A we put in front of a word. We could say tonal, atonal, and that's the opposite. Moral, amoral. Well, the opposite of music in that way, music, amusement. And he started seeing that happen with the Enlightenment about 200 years ago.
Interesting.
This is unbelievable. Democracy, we wouldn't want to go back, but it changed the parameters. We start seeing circuses touring around because people could be entertained by that. And we start to see virtuosos coming forward. And it's interesting, like this last song I just played, I was in Dusseldorf, Germany, at an international guitar night, and he had four of us. The host had four of us on stage from different countries, and he wants us all to play one song after each other, and so he plays some wonderful piece, and but very quick, very fast, and some exotic tuning. And then he turns to the guy from Paris, and he looks over at him, and he starts tapping on his guitar and in an exotic tuning, and the crowd is going crazy. Well, the guy from Pisa, Italy, he looks over at him, and it's his turn, and he starts kicking the guitar with his knee and using the guitar as a bongo, and just went crazy.
Yeah.
And we were all just like, whoa, this is just unbelievable. And the crowd was in a frenzy. And so then they look over to me, and I'm going, to myself, this doesn't make sense.
I just want to be clear, were you layering on what each person was doing, or each person had their own opportunity to solo?
They each had a solo.
Yeah, right.
One after the other. And I'm the last.
Then they look to you. And what does Doan do?
And I'm thinking, like, this progression doesn't make sense, and I kind of say a quick prayer, and then I kind of hear this voice say, what did Fernando Sor say? He said, play what you love, and so I played that tune, and it was like a tenth of the notes were played by the other people, and afterwards, no one applauded. It was complete silence, and the host goes, "Oh, okay, well, okay," and eventually somebody in the back of the hall starts applauding, has his hands over his head, They didn't want to wake up from the muse.
It's a huge thing. I believe that audience clapping should be outlawed. But I'm with you, man. They were in a transcendent state.
And this is what you do when you muse about life. But we have more entertainment today that we put on in the background.
Right.
It's just there, and it's to distract us from life. We had a hard day. We're kind of like in a bad mood. Let's put on something to change our mood. But this is something that it's the old idea that you muse about something. You actually be in somebody's presence. You be in the presence of something, and you try to take it in. And so anyway, that's.
I feel like you're describing the Jake Feinberg show. I mean, the idea of the human connection. But I mean, how do you feel? At least in the last half century, how has the significance of music changed in our culture? Because you alluded to multitasking, background entertainment, as opposed to burning. I mean, I want to burn when I hear live music, even if it's just acoustic. I mean, I want it to come from the heart and the soul, and not the head.
And see, and this is the stuff that I think a lot of musicians are after, but it's something that we're kind of being crowded out by increased volume over the last couple hundred years, more heavy rhythms that put you into your body, which isn't necessarily bad, but we also want to be able to perceive and have a conversation and interact with, and so louder, more rhythmic, more bass heavy, more powerful, and so what I'm looking for is things that are kind of timeless, and timeless is being face to face. It's something that you have computers, which I'm not advocating throwing away your phone or your computer or anything, but add to Facebook, FaceTime, that it's so nuanced, being with somebody and hearing somebody's story. And musically, that's what I try to share with people is I'll take somebody somewhere, and they kind of go with me, and that's timeless, It's walking on the beach is timeless. Hearing the wind and through the trees is timeless, and appreciating somebody's smile is timeless. We were all like a miracle, and there's been sort of a downgrading of that, I think, by just taking things at face value. I like that. That's one of the things I think is a mind blower about your show, is that you're trying to go behind the scenes. We see what is, but tell me more about when you were a teen, or what got you started, and things like that.
Well, it's also like seeing something that's there that no one else is. It's like the needle, and there's something there that is I can see. It's behind, and it's never been uncovered, and I'm able to extract that information and inspire or educate. I mean, it's really about education, really, at the end of the day. Yeah. But I wonder about. Julian Priester, a great trombone player, decorated jazzer, bebopper through and through, still playing. And when he was working with Sun Ra in the 50s, Sun Ra used to just point to him, and he'd have to solo. And you had to have your own internal time feel really strong, because the rhythm section was playing melodically. They weren't, you couldn't rely on the rhythm section in Sun Ra's band to keep time. You had to keep your own internal time. And I wanted you to talk about the transition that you had as far as developing your own internal time feel, and if in fact, when you started to play, not in that rock band, but when you started to play with a trap set drummer, and how that affected your time feel.
Yeah, well, I played with a drummer, in kind of my rock days, and
is he still around, by the way? I got to get to everybody in that band, by the way.
Yeah.
What was the name of that band?
Oh, it was called the Doan, and we didn't.
You didn't cut any records or anything.
We didn't do any records, but it was a kind of a thing that it was raw and fresh and all of that. But I found myself, a lot of acoustic players started to impress me. Even John Fahey lived not far from where I lived, and ended up being a close friend of mine.
Really?
Because he moved up here to Salem, of all things, and so I got to perform with him and hang out with him, and he was such a visionary. as well. He didn't seem to know the rules, and so he would.
Or he did, but he knew how to break the rules.
Yeah,
or, you know, I mean, there's something like that.
I learned, the fingerstyle. I learned the classics in the fingerstyle, and I felt it was all music. I mean, like I went and saw Julian Bream, was a classical player, and I went backstage, and he'd always take so many chances. Every performance was different, and I got backstage, and I said, "Excuse me, Julian, but can you say in one sentence? I know you got to go back for an encore, but in one sentence, what's the secret to how you play?" And he looks at me and he says, "Just have fun." And it just blew me away. And then he looked over to me.
Why did it blow you away? Because that is about as simple as it gets. But
it's as simple as it gets. He says, "Don't tell your teacher."
Right.
It's that kind of thing. And so that kind of being in the moment and being fun, because music is temporal art. We're in the moment.
Yeah.
And then I'd follow, Mississippi John Hurt and the various other players.
Like cats like, I mean, were you hip to David Lindley and Mason too? I mean, there was an banjo anthology with both of them on it from like '65.
But I mean, just the Ross Elizabeth Cotton. I got to see her several times. I remember going up and I mean, she at the concert she'd say, "Can you turn the lights up on all everybody out there? I want to see who I'm with."
It's a communal thing.
And I'd go up and she was in her 90s touring, and I remember holding her hand. She grabbed my hands. They were like hot. They were like nuclear, and I said, "Thank you so much for just being you." And she says, "Well, thank you for being you." But thank you for being here and coming up and waiting afterwards. She says, "This could be so lonely being on the road. I just love being able to talk with people." I mean, and stuff like that. It just stays with you. And then I would hear, the New Christy Minstrels growing up, and Green, 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 they say, on the far side of the hill. And I ended up touring with them. I ended up meeting Randy Sparks, and he had a huge collection of instruments, and he loved by playing and what I was doing, and so and then I met Mason Williams, and he's just so great. He's so funny, and we toured, and I mean, and I know you're going to interview him, and it's like, if truth be told, he's way more important than just classical gas. He's
way more. I mean, again, that's the part. The Jake Feinberg show. I'm not interested in the pop stuff.
The gatekeeper for so many people. The Smothers Brothers show, and he kind of invents in so many ways late night TV and so forth. Anyway, but it was fun. I learned so much from him, and he's very much into structure. He's very much classical, and we're kind of like two peas in a pod. And I just love just hanging out with him. It's just so fun. And then musically, he'd have me do different things. And he'd give me way more opportunities than just backing him. I thought the gig was Mason Williams, in concert, with a few side people. And he was so generous with a number of us, with Art Maddox and playing, having him do stuff.
Yeah, you guys are salt of the earth people. I mean, I just want to go back to this. Did you, when you became a leader of a non-electric contingent, did you have percussion or a rhythm section with you?
Well, there is a need for pulse. That's
tension and release. It's crucial.
It's sort of, if you mess up on a note, it's not anywhere as bad as messing up on the rhythm. You got to keep that pulse. That's your connection, your lifeline between you and the audience. And so in recordings, there would be things that I'd have scored for orchestra and choir and whatever, and Billy Oskay, who is my producer, is just a genius, and he'd have me do click tracks and try to get me to play around the click track, because it'd be like chaos bringing everybody else in. But we'd have Tommy Hayes, who was a drummer, Irish baron player. And
how do you spell that? How do you spell that percussion?
Baron or baron.
Baron.
It's his hand thing, and he
Wow.
there was this contingent of Irish players that came up to Portland. That's not far from here, and Michael O'Donnell, he was the leader of the Bothy band. It's like the People's Band in Ireland, and I'm of all things, I'm traveling in Ireland and hitchhiking, and I have very little money, and I hitchhiked out of this coastal town and went to a bed and breakfast that I thought would be kind of cheap. It did look like it was made up. It was any kind of deluxe place,
Right.
and these two older ladies answered the door, and they tell me it was more than I wanted to pay, and I turned around, and I almost walked away from my future, and they go, oh, but you must see the room, and they turn me around, and they bring me in, and they say, we'll give you an ocean view, and we won't even charge you for a shower, and you need one, and all this kind of stuff. And we'll teach you to play the Irish drum, the baron, and we'll dance a jig for you if you stay. And so it's like, I'm staying, I'm thinking bed and breakfast, the breakfast part, I'm going to kind of take every orange and apple and put it in my jacket,
Right.
stuff. And then so I give them a postcard in the morning after all of this amazing dancing and stuff happens in the evening. And they tell me they're dancing to the Bothy band, which I didn't know. They were surprised. And I said, isn't this the Chieftains? They said, no. They hardly play in Ireland anymore. It's the Bothy band. So then they say, I give them a card that says Oregon Toothpick, and it has this big log on the back of a logging truck. And they look at each other and say, oh, you must play a trick on our bad nephew. And he comes to Ireland, but he doesn't come to see our new bed and breakfast and all this stuff. And here's his phone number. So I get home and I call up this guy, Michael, and he goes, who is it? And I said, well, it doesn't matter. And he says, oh, it's an unlisted number, man, And I said, well, it's, I just was in Ireland. I heard you're Irish, and you should go to all the best places. Like, there's a place in Lahinch. He goes, my daft aunts put you up to this. And it's none other than Michael O'Donnell that I ended up, meeting his aunties. And I call him and he says, I'll tell you what, I'll prove to my aunties what a good nephew I am. And he said, you come to Portland, I'll treat you to lunch, and what are you doing now, And so I come, and I tell him I'm a musician. He says, oh, bring an instrument, And so I bring the harp guitar, and he goes, oh, man, I've never seen an instrument like that. But I've never heard music like that. You need to record this with our engineer, a fiddler for our band, and night called Night Noise. And I went and met Billy Oskey that way. He lives up the road, but I met him through the aunties who introduced. Anyway, it's just
you almost walked away from that bed and breakfast. I mean, it's unbelievable.
And so it's just there's so much serendipity with the Irish and things like that. And so he gave me this kind of amazing sound, and Tommy Hayes was there.
Is Hayes still with us? Is he local cat or?
No, he's Irish, and he came over with kind of the remnants of the Bothy band, and so we'd have these guys in the studio, and Billy Oscar would say, "Hey Tommy, do you hear anything?" And so then we'd get everything from goat's toenails on different pieces and things, and so Era Isle of the Saints was kind of, it seemed to be the masterpiece that came out of that. There were a lot of other recordings we did that are just absolutely amazing, and a lot to do with Billy Oskey's vision of pushing me to do things I didn't know I could do, to get the performances out of me. And there's a lot that happens in the studio that you don't know, and we'd go back and forth. I never argued with somebody so badly, and then there would be these Irish guys hearing the album, and they'd say, why are you calling it Era Isle of the Saints? Era is the name of our country. He says, why don't you just call it John Doan's Vacation in Ireland? You're trying to rip us off, And when I finished the album, I sent it to these Irish guys, and they wrote back to me, and they said, we're so sorry. This is a love letter. This is a love letter to us. Thank you. Nobody there would write it, and so anyway, it's just, but there's rhythm things in that. But I think the thing that is an interesting thing. I teach at a university. I'm a professor of music. I teach music in America, and the thing that a lot of my students don't realize is that Europeans brought over melody more than rhythm.
Absolutely.
The melody over rhythm, and then we get this vital group of people coming from West Africa that against their will, but
diaspora, yeah,
a black population that in spite of it all has shared this kind of rhythmic celebration of life, and kind of remind us that we have a body that we can move, and so forth, and so we get kind of the country blues and stuff like that, and American fingerstyle having that tradition, and then those who went to the harp guitar found the instruments that had the bass strings, and then I kind of wedding with Europe. I love rhythm, but I love this melody, and so this is many of the harp guitarists in America wouldn't go for this, would only go for the bass strings, but in Europe, so many of the players, they didn't have our same history, and they love the melody, and most of them. I was just at a harp guitar festival where they asked me to be kind of an honored guest because all of them are playing the guitar like mine, and so I'm kind of bringing it back to them, and even the lady who was the sponsor, I said, "Do you play the harp guitar?" She says, "No, I heard your Era Isle of the Saints album, and I fell in love with the harp guitar and this music," and so it's been kind of a fun spin-off, but it's melodic in nature. It's saying something to you and putting you into a space. It's a different thing, and there can be melody, there can be driving rhythm, but it kind of takes you off somewhere, and I'm somewhere where I'm lost in the moment, and through Randy Sparks, he asked me from the Christy Minstrels, he asked me to play with Burl Ives, who was kind of basically brought folk music to the cities, and in the 1940s. And I grew up with, Big Rock Candy Mountain and Have a Holly Jolly Christmas and Goober Peas and all that kind of stuff. And I got to meet Burl and play with him. And he got the biggest kick out of me because I brought all these little zithers and banjos and the harp guitar. And so he asked me into his room because he was suffering, he was in his 80s, suffering from the latter stages of leukemia. And he's laying there, and he doesn't want to be laying there with all these famous people who came out, to celebrate his last concert. But he asked me to play for him, and he says, "Oh, John, you make me feel like old King Cole." And I did feel like I was playing for royalty, and I'd play for him, and I thought one tune, and I'd leave, and he said, "Oh, keep playing, keep playing." He says, this music, this takes me somewhere. It's like heavenly, and it was just so wonderful, and we get to talk about music, and this is the thing that really blows my mind is you meet these people, and I'd say, who are you? Are you a movie star? Are you a folk historian? Are you a performer? A TV personality? He says, "I'm a bard." I said, "You're a bard? What do you think a bard is?" He says, "Well, I'm Irish." A background, Ives. And when you look at it, Randy Sparks is also, John Fahey also, Mason Williams,
really?
Welsh background. I mean, all these people would have been bards back then.
Right.
I've become a bard. And I said, what's a bard? He says, "Well, a bard is somebody who tells people their story. You have to have like three things that you do to do what I do." And I said, "What's that?" He says, "Well, you have to play a piece like your life depends on it. Every piece is important." And what's the other two? He says, "Well, then you have to think the piece is the most important piece in the world, and what's the last one?" He says, "Well, you got to get your audience to believe all the same thing."
Well, you have to get into a space You can't expect the audience to go there unless you go there first.
Unless you go there.
You've got to go there with the, Night Noise, did you say that?
Night Noise was...
Could you demonstrate that? Could you play that tune?
Well, Night Noise, let me just do a little...
Got a Foggy Mountain breakdown.
Yeah, we got okay. Okay, yeah, so here's a piece I was sitting with Burl, and we spent a whole evening. I played it like everything I knew. And
he just wanted you to keep playing.
Oh, and then
because you were telling his story.
And we were back and forth with stories, and I felt like I had gone to the top of the mountain, And he says, "This is what I see." I go, "Golly, is this here?" I didn't know, And anyway, so then he falls asleep, and I just start improvising, and I do kind of a bagpipe send-off, And so this is what came, and he's asleep.
We have to do about 7 iterations of this interview, but for this portion, before we wrap up, I wanted to ask you about your concept of love and how you bring love to the world.
Oh, okay, wow, that's a great question. I think that what the Beatles said, what the world needs now,
But what the world needs, all we need is love. Yeah.
Yeah, all we need is love. Well, it's the kind of thing that we seriously need it more. We need to connect with each other. We need to loving somebody is kind of accepting them where they're at. And music can do that. And it's being face to face with people, giving people time, listening to them. People matter. Letting people know they matter, that's loving. You know, and the thing that I found, like in being in LA and stuff where I grew up, it was so easy for people not to matter. And road rage, you know, hey, you're kind of not going fast enough.
Right. Get your inanimate object out of the way.
Get out of the way. And I think we've become so polarized that we've lost that face-to-face time with people because we're going through a medium of the internet and so forth, which is really great, but you can't lose sight of taking time with each other. If somebody believes different than you, what's wrong with going well, how did you get there? You know?
Well, that's what Mason was saying. I mean, Mason, what I'm saying is the judgment has become at the forefront. You get tagged as without any real evidence. The example, Mason Williams, McCarthy blackballed Pete Seeger because they thought he was a communist. Okay, and Mason was fascinated with this whole idea of what is a communist. So he started to go to these communist meetings. He figured, if I'm going to find out what that is, I got to go check out what they're talking about.
Yeah,
that was just an exploratory mission, just the way you just said. Well, Yet in today's world, if Mason Williams went to a communist event, he'd be labeled a communist right off the bat. Yeah. So it's this sweet. How have you learned to get out of your own way and let your ego get out of the way? Not even in the music, just as a transcendent human being.
Well, I think this idea of transcendence is something that is often elusive and it eluded us.
And maybe overused, too.
I mean, maybe I may be simplifying things, but I think the world, we've got this horizontal plane and we've got a vertical plane. And the horizontal plane is that everybody's opinion means so much. I want to please you, I don't want to offend you, and so forth and so on. And this person's has authority or whatever. And that's the horizontal. And I think we're spending way too much time on the horizontal. Mm. But this up and down, wow. Going not this way, but going this way. There's got to be something more than us. You feel that when you're at the ocean. I feel that when I'm out here in the forest and hearing the birds and so forth. There's a faith in something you can't see. And we're very sensuous sort of people. We believe we're scientific. You have to show me, you have to prove me, something. I have to see it under a microscope. But there's this other reality that is vertical. That I believe that there's God. And that God loves us. And I mean, if you get to it, I mean, Christ kind of turned everybody on their heels, said, my Father is in everybody, and to the extent that you care for the widows and the children and the people in prison and the disadvantaged. I mean, he's talking about loving everybody, and that's how you do the horizontal. I mean, that's how you do the vertical.
Well, I was going to say, the what you're describing, just in a mathematical sense, like the horizontal is very linear. Yeah. Okay, so you have this, almost in music too, the formula trip that just drives me crazy. This is all very arranged, and it's all very super tight, and there's no opportunity for spontaneous melodic invention in some forms of music. With the vertical plane, you keep getting higher and higher. Yes. And then eventually, the collective consciousness of the band hits the audience. Yes. And then goes back to the band. And so that is one of the, I never thought that well, what is that? It's not geometry. It's like.
Well, that's the thing with the cross.
Even, the axis isn't. I'm not even a math. I got 300 on my math SATs, but how did you learn to get out of your own way?
Well, I think when you spend time with music, you find that it's dynamic. It's not linear. It's not science.
Vertical.
Music connects everything. It doesn't separate. That science does that. You know, I mean, there's this fullness, there's this wholeness that we're so desperately wanting. You know, science wants to separate everything so we can know. Academia wants to separate everything so that we're going to learn about fruit flies or whatever, you know, or dissect something out of you. But why did you get that way? What's the wholeness? You know, and I think music kind of, if you spend time with it, it makes you appreciate the dynamic of things. That everything is connected. You just don't know how. You just have to kind of, as a musician, accept that you just don't know everything. You know?
And this is the key thing that I want you to talk about, because like I was with David Friesen yesterday, and he was talking about, in our first radio interview, he was talking about, you know, he got tired of man's view of God.
Yeah.
The idea of this ego, this inflated idea of man knows this, what God is. Yeah. It's the individual trip. It's your own individual trip to find that kind of consciousness, to find your own.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, because it can get dogmatic, and that's what happens in a lot of our society. People get inculcated with groupthink, when in fact it's your own personal journey towards the divine.
Well, I guess I feel like God loves us, and in the perfection of that love, God doesn't make us love Him. You know, it's my friends. If I made them, I said, you have to care for me. You have to love me. That's not friendship. That's a thing that's sort of, you know, it's a little bit paradoxical, and you know, and if it's according to scriptures, you know, God does love us, and He talks to us. We probably talk to everybody, but we call them prophets.
Right.
And a lot of times, and they're often people who are separated and apart, like David. David's somehow born to some maidservant or something, and he's kind of not in the household with all of his illustrious and tall and handsome brothers, and he's out there in a field, and he's got nothing to do except watch, you know, the livestock, because they don't have fences, and so he's just playing music and getting into the dynamic of things, and singing to the stars, and singing to God, and God's going like, oh wow, there's somebody down there actually talking to me. You know, and this is King David, you know, and he's so tremendous, because he's not only a musician, he's a poet, he's a battle leader, he's a ruler, and it had all these things. It's mind blowing. And then this thing, kind of the son of David thing, with you know, God sending His son to us in the Christian faith. I think that's a mind blower, to actually try to kind of make friends with God by not just doing what you slavishly, you know, think you're supposed to do, but you have to make it make sense to you. And this has been sort of a bit of my problem, is that because of this dynamic, no matter if there's somebody that believes completely different than me, I end up falling in love with them. You know, I just because
bless you, John Doan.
They're just so unique and special, you know. And sometimes, I mean, the thing that we don't really understand is how culture often is a result of the best of us and even the worst of us, and we get kind of this whole we get traumatized.
Well, also the idea that if you don't agree, where you fall in love with the person, people get so offended that their belief system is somehow not in line with somebody else's, so they get offended, and there's this sort of reaction, very reactionary kind of thing, which doesn't allow for dialogue. You just stay on the surface, and then acrimony and resentment comes in. Music tends to break all that stuff down, and before we wrap, I mean, I'm on a sacred journey, and I was hoping you could play for peace before we wrap.
Okay, sure. Let me do a little tune back.
John Doan, legendary harp guitarist, about to move out of Salem, Oregon. I'm not sure if I can publicly.
Yeah, I'm
Going surfing.
I'm going surfing. It started out with surf music. I listened to Dick Delavikian,
Oh yeah.
an Armenian, doing kind of oud-like playing on the guitar.
On that
and it
Dalton
became
label,
surf
Dalton,
guitar, and kind of a
The
melting
Ventures,
pot.
maybe, or
In the Ventures, yeah.
Yeah.
I just love that stuff. That's how I got started, actually. Yeah, I love kind of the dynamic of history. And this piece called "The Water's Wide," and it's sort of it was a love song, but it also was about the brokenness that happened between people who lived in Europe, and they came here, and it must have hurt. It must have hurt. It was full of excitement, but you have to let the past go, but you lose all that relationship to family and history, and you have to start something new.
Right.
And that's what I think this tune's about. But the water's wide between us, even between people, like we were just talking about. It's a dynamic thing, and you reach. I'm trying to kind of create bridges. I talk to my audiences. I try to tell them where I was when I wrote a piece. I want them to go there with me, and that's what's in common with all of my performing. So I tried to kind of tell the story of the tune first to kind of bring it more close or personal, and then the tune's actually kind of talking. I split the tune in half with each other across the pond. Here it goes.
forever journey continues. John Doan, thank you for being part of the program. We'll do it again, my brother.
I hope so.
It's the Jake Feinberg Show. See you later.